My purpose of talking for the next 15-20 minutes, maybe, and then we can have an interaction, is about this book that we have co authored, Embrace the Future. And I must start by answering the question, what is this about embracing the future? Haven't we always been embracing the future? What is the need for another book on it? I think to the best of my knowledge, there is no other book which captures something about the future without talking about artificial intelligence and language models and AI, because everybody thinks the future is of technology. But the future is of strategy, and it's of human response to strategy. We have a distinguished former professor of IIM over here, and he runs a strategy program. So I'm very nervous because I'm speaking about his subject in front of him. But anyway, so here is the reason why you should be interested in this subject. When take it out of the context of business and enterprise, think of it in your life, think of it in national affairs, society, and you'll find that although human beings have been adapting to change for centuries, for thousands of years, otherwise, otherwise we would not be here. There's always frictional loss because society doesn't welcome it collectively. If you want to make a big change in AMA, Mr. Sawan will find that it's not that easy. And Mr. Unmesh will also have come to the same conclusion. So you have to think about how to bring that change in. It's the same in the country. It is same for the state. It is same for your society. It's same for your building society, where we call it cooperative society, but all uncooperative people are brought into one building. And it is very difficult. नाम है cooperative society, but अंदर में सब uncooperative. Clubs, it happens in sports clubs. So you see it happens within families. That the family is supposed to be one, but they are all moving at different speeds, and families are having to separate, sometimes acrimoniously. And the reason is very simple. Human beings are intellectually adaptive, but socially unadaptive. Because intellectual adaptation happens through the left brain, which is logic, rationality. And so we are taught, if you become a student of management or get a diploma from AMA, you're taught how to think rationally, and you learn rational things, physics, chemistry, accountancy, etc. But the other part of your brain, the right part, is very slow to adapt. And therefore, the two speed brain, like double engine we talk about in politics, our double engines don't work together sometimes. And that is what causes things to move a bit slowly. You see, the human brain, our limbs have adapted, our ways of living have adapted, but our brain is exactly the same as it was 5,000 years ago. And that is the evidence that the brain adapts far more slowly than the body. Now, we want to embrace the future because the left brain is telling us tomorrow won't be like yesterday. But the right brain is saying, bhai, aaj ka din nikalo, kal dekha jayega. When people get married, each one thinks the other one has to adapt to the other person. I'm not saying him or her because I may create a problem for myself. Both. But actually, the double engine has to work. Otherwise, the marriage cannot sustain, right? I always pride myself that I have adjusted as much to my wife as my wife has adjusted to me. Otherwise, we would not be married 55 years, right? When you have a different equation that that person must adapt to my, then you have a problem. So, in short, we are very good at embracing the past. I can show you photographs. You can meet your school friends. You can meet your college friends, IIM reunions. And you can see pictures, and you can see that the past is easy to embrace because you have it recorded in some form, physical form. But what is the future? The right brain activity. You have to imagine it. And embracing something that's imaginary is like embracing the mistress you don't have because it's imaginary and you don't know. So we thought this subject is very important because there is no doubt that much is changing around us. Much is changing. I don't need to explain that. I don't need to talk about it. But I will not be talking about technology change, artificial intelligence, and all those things. Lots of training courses are going on, artificial intelligence. But what about the natural intelligence? उसका ट्रेनिंग कौन कर रहा है? So I must tell you a little bit about, therefore, this is a subject that should interest you. And what I have found is that there are lots of books on strategy, the left brain activity. You will find Michael Porter, Clayton Christensen. If you want a list of all the books, ask Professor Atanu Ghosh, he will tell you. Each one is about 300-400 pages and very difficult to understand. It will appeal to your left brain. Then you have a separate set of books. It's almost like one is this party, the other is the other party. Jim Collins, John Cotter, who talk about the behavioral side. They are independent books. And you go to a course, somebody will teach you the behavioral side, somebody will come and teach you the strategy side. Both are gurus, but nobody puts it together. That is left to you. So what we have done in this book, and that is the reason why I think it's an interesting twist, that we have put both together. My colleague, who's not here, Rishi Bhattacharya, he's a thinker, he's an intellectual. All Bengalis are a bit like that. बहुत सोचते हैं ज़्यादा. And he is very strong on strategy. And one day we have worked together for a long time, and we had a friendly discussion as to which is more important, knowing what to do or how to implement it. I was of the view that how to implement is more important. He was of the view that what to do is more important. What to do means strategy. How to do means the soft side. Finally, we said, why are we arguing just because we are friends? You need both. But we looked for a book which has both in it and which is practical and not academic. I'm sure there are books, but I feel that there are not enough books. And both of us are practitioners. We thought we could bring a very practical angle. So this book is full of examples from Tata, from Levers, from Microsoft, from Google, from cell phones, from medicine to building industry. How to think of a very, very old industry like a building industry, construction industry, how to think of it differently. And you'll find these are very practical examples. I doubt if you'll find any jargon in it, which you find difficult to understand. So, I've come here to praise our book. I've done so. But now I should leave it there and tell you a little bit about how this book came about. And I have been influenced personally by two books, which I have read in the last 10, 15 years, because I have been asking myself the question, why is it so difficult to implement change? When I began my career, 55, 57 years ago, once in a while, the chairman or the CEO would say, we're going to have some major reorganization, right? By the time I finished my career, it was happening all the time. In other words, adjustment and reorganization is a permanent feature now. In those days, you called somebody and said, you take charge of this reorganization. Now the CEO has to direct it himself. And if it is moved into the center part of the CEO's agenda, as much as improving the performance, the share price, the profitability, then are we giving it the space that it needs? And I do believe, Mr. President, since you mentioned, the learnings of this book can be converted into a workshop or a class or whatever you want to call it, where we help people how to be future leaders. I actually run on my social media, on YouTube, something called the Tomorrow Leader. कि कल का लीडर कैसा रहेगा? How is he different from कल का leader, meaning yesterday's leader? कल का leader is different from कल का leader. And you have people like the Professor Atanu Ghosh who can bring the academic content. And Rishi Bhattacharya, you have not met him, has been teaching in the University of Michigan with C.K. Prahlad. So he also has a good academic orientation. And we can put together some sort of a workshop on this embracing the future, give it whatever name you want, and try how to develop it. Because the biggest challenge in our becoming a developed nation by 2047, not the biggest challenge, one of the big challenges is we are not thinking about tomorrow. I mean, one man thinking at the top about tomorrow is not good enough. We all have to learn to think about tomorrow rather than yesterday. And I think this is a contribution that AMA can make. But this started working in my mind about 10, 15 years ago. And I was very influenced by Paul Kennedy's book. Paul Kennedy's written a book called The Rise and the Fall of the Great Empires. It's history. And I studied the Ming dynasty of China. I studied the Mughal dynasty in India. I studied the Ottoman Empire from Turkey and two or three others. And I found there's a standard pattern. The rise is very fast, but the decline is very slow. So you look at the Mughal Empire, it started around 1500 with Babur. It finished about 1700, 1800 with Bahadur Shah Zafar, 300 years. But the peak was in Akbar's time. And Akbar came after Babur in 40 years, 50 years. And then it leveled off. Jahangir, Shah Jahan, by the time after Aurangzeb, it took 100 years after Aurangzeb for it to collapse. The same with the Ottoman Empire, the same with the Ming dynasty. And I said, why do we get this asymmetric parabola where the rise is fast and the decline is slow? It's almost like a rocket, a space scientist shooting a rocket. It goes up and then it takes its time to fall down. And I was intrigued to learn what is it that causes the rise? What is the booster rocket in it? What causes the rise, I found, is there is ambition, there is energy, there is innovation, there is outward lookingness, and it is unrelenting. Lage raho munna bhai. And in all these empires, you will find even the Congress party, not to become political, but the rise of the Congress party, if you forget the politics of it, and then how Gandhiji came and did whatever he did, was fantastic in its time. Then comes the decline period, this long decline, because you start looking inward, you become conservative, you become lazy, indolent. Chai pana ka paisa ho gaya hai. If see business families, there are very well-known business families in this city who are the primary drivers of industrialization, and you can see it everywhere. So the great lesson from that is that those who embrace the future survive and carry on. Those who embrace the past decline. Now, how do you disengage from embracing the past and embrace the future? This is the heart of this book and what we have written. Now, we keep saying lots of things are changing. Technology is changing. Society is changing. When my wife and I got married so many years ago, it is different from my daughter-in-law getting married to my son, and it will be different when their children get married. And we get obsessed with the pace of change. I've seen a lot of presentations from consultants and thinkers, good presentations, saying that everything is changing. If you don't adjust to AI, you'll be finished. This, that. It is true. But then, Damuru Baj you can't sort of adapt, Adaptation requires you to be able to understand the change and cope with the change. Now, the tools to cope with change are also increasing exponentially. Today, sitting here with your cell phone, you can find out whether the plane is landing in Ahmedabad airport. And you can arrive there at the right time. So the tools are also changing. What happens to us is when we fail to adapt to that gap. So when I began my career, they said computers are coming. Computer आएगा तो सब खत्म हो जाएगा, which is true and untrue, depends on how you look at it. But we went to the bank. I'm sure people of my age group here will say, you went every Saturday to the bank, got your khata with ball pen, and then you would have to check his arithmetic, huh, to see whether he's made an adding mistake. Now we don't even look at it. You don't even think about it. It just happens by itself, as it were. So don't get fussed with the pace of change. Get fussed with the gap between the pace of change and the pace of adaptation. I call this the adaptation quotient, AQ. We have all been taught IQ. We have all been taught EQ. I don't have to explain what those mean. I'm adding a third one, AQ. When you begin your career, you're selected from IIM for having high IQ, smart boy, good CGPA. When he comes to the middle of his career, you say he can't get along with people, or he can get along with people, good EQ. But when he comes to be the leader at the age of 50, 55, 60, has he got good AQ? Can he keep pace with what is changing? So the transition from pure IQ to little bit of IQ, little bit of EQ, to a little bit of IQ plus EQ plus lots of AQ is the future leader's definition. But how do you do that? I'm suggesting that AMA can work on it because I think it will be a good contribution. I don't know if it's unique contribution, but academics across the road can work with you to see how to provide such. And I have found that the best, although the book does not have all these examples which I'm telling you, but I'm trying to tell you what's not in the book, having in the hope that the book will be intriguing enough for you to buy and read. But nature is a very good teacher. And we somehow in our approach don't have time for nature. I mean, you don't need Baba Ramdev to tell you don't know how to breathe. But most of us don't know how to breathe. But when Baba Ramdev tells you, you sit in front of the TV and do ho 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 ho, right? Because something you took for granted, he's pointed out you're not doing right. So it's the simplest things in life that we fail to do properly because we are chasing more complex things. And that is the riddle that we have to solve. I'll give you an example. We think we are all stationary and sitting here. But you know, the earth is never still. It is working 24 by 7. And it's working in a way where you don't feel it is moving, but actually it's moving. You have to work that way. In other words, they call it sadhana. That when you are working all the time, but yet in a calm environment, that's the way the earth works. There are also lessons you can learn from it. We know when you see these movies on the Serengeti Park, nature parks, that competition is what creates adaptation. When the leopard runs after a deer, it creates adaptation. But we would like our business to be in a low competition area because अपना गाड़ी चल रहा है. ज़्यादा कंपटीशन आ गया देन जैसे चाइना ये कर रहा है वो ये कर रहा है मिनिस्ट्री में जाओ यार कोई एप्लीकेशन दे के आओ कि उसका इंपोर्ट ड्यूटी बढ़ा दो. These are, I've also done it. I'm not blaming anybody. I've also done the same thing. But it is competition that drives adaptation. That's why in political systems, they say you must have competition, Labour Party and Conservative Party. If Conservative Party has all the seats or 70% of the seats, then the Labour Party becomes non-functional. So you want a good balance. The third lesson is we chase size. We want to be the biggest, the richest, the fastest growing. And there are pink papers which will put your photograph there and say he created this empire. And अच्छा लगता है ना, you don't mind seeing your picture in the pink paper in the morning. But frankly, nature tells you that the biggest is not the one who wins. The dinosaur died. It is the smallest and the most adaptive that win. The longest living species is the virus and the bacteria. They are older than, much older than dinosaurs. They're still there. They remind you periodically कि हम हैं COVID. हमारा 19 है 20 नंबर आ रहा है. The number of books I write matches with COVID. 19th book COVID-19. अभी हमारा 20 आएगा अगस्त में. I am not hoping that there's a COVID-20, by the way. Our traditional knowledge, if you go to any guru, not to learn religion, but to learn how to live a good life, he will say, keep your body moving, but keep your mind still. यहाँ पे स्थिर होना चाहिए. That's why they tell us to practice meditation. But what do we do in our companies? Keep your mind moving and the body may be still. So we put on weight, but we think our mind is working very much. We do the opposite inadvertently. So there are these two parts, and we have to create a double engine out of it, the strategic part and the human part. And I want to give you, when you change, you're never sure whether you're changing too fast, whether you're changing the right things at the right time. But essentially, in any change program, any transformation program, you ask yourself 4 or 5 questions, which are there in the book. What is the purpose? Why am I doing this? Those days are behind you when you just said, and I'm making some steel rods so that it can be used. But why do you make the steel rod? I want to make money. What are you going to do with the money? And so on and so forth. You go move backwards and you find you're obsessed with purpose. Jamshedji Tata started Tata. I'm sorry, I'm taking examples of Tata and Lever, not because I want to praise them, but मुझे और कुछ आता नहीं है. Huh? But even you take your own industrialists from this city, Lalbhai, Sarabhai, you'll find the same thing in their books, and there are books and material available. They had a purpose. कि समाज के लिए कुछ करना है. Huh? Bajaj, all these companies. And you must have a purpose. Then you must have a targeted future. Having growth for the sake of growth makes no sense. If you got a 5-year-old son or daughter and you keep on feeding him, कि जितना मोटा होगा उतना अच्छा है, you won't have your son or daughter for very long. You have to have a balance. Growth for what purpose? But we are in a mode now in business where startups think कि by the time I'm 3 years old, I must have a valuation of $2 billion. बिलियन से कम और डॉलर की बात होती है, रुपये की बात बंद हो गई है. These are not very good, in my opinion. These have happened for a variety of reasons, which is not the subject of today's discussion. So we've got these two parts in the book where we say, think of your purpose, set a targeted future, look at all the alternative routes to get to the targeted future. Discuss amongst your people and choose one, and then go after it. But be ready to change it because you're never sure you've chosen the right path. That's the second part of the book, which is the strategic part. I'm simplifying it and summarizing it so that we have enough time for a little discussion. The first part of the book says, once you've applied your mind and done your left brain analysis of what to do with strategy and how to adapt for the future, then you must figure out how to do it. Because it won't happen because you sat in your corner office and dreamt it up. Are people buying into what I'm saying? Am I changing things too fast? How do you know whether you're changing things too fast or not? And this happens whether you're in government, companies, public sector, families, and everything. So it's a very common thing that happens. The grandfather worked very hard sitting on a gaddi. The son took it over and he was wearing a trouser and he had an office. And the next son went to Harvard and he came back and said, oh, बाप दादा जो कर रहे हैं सब useless है, कुछ और करो. And there's a tension. Most of us know of it. Some of us have experienced it. And then people go their own way and they deal with it. We have convinced ourselves with education. None of these is wrong, but they are not right either. It's possible not to be wholly right and be partly wrong, or wholly wrong and partly right. It's possible. Because we think we know a lot. You think about it. What we are seeing in our visual range of frequencies is only limited. A hawk, because its eye structure is different, can see far further than we can. That's why Garuda was able to tell Ramchandraji, who came and took away and what did I see? Bees can see ultraviolet light, which you and I can't see. So they see things in different colors. Sunil Parekh is sitting in front of me, just seems to be wearing a maroon shirt and a black trouser. But if a bee was saying, he say, "Ba rangila hai," he see other colors. Maroon maybe there's a combination of colors. Um, Different sort of. We all know that bats navigate through sound. And we know that we can hear things only from 40 cycles to 200 cycles, to 20,000 cycles. But there is a frequency below that and a frequency above that. And so the challenge for the leader of tomorrow, who's going to embrace the future, is to see the invisible, to hear the inaudible, and to feel what cannot be felt. Now, this sounds like a Guruji telling you, how do you do it? That's the question. And in the book, we have got several, which takes lessons from nature, because you can't run a class on this, how to see the. I want to give you one simple story which illustrates the point. There is something called a world pigeon race. Are you aware? Anybody knows? No? It sounds funny, no? World pigeon race. But there is. It's not started last year. It has been going on since 1870. They come in France to a place called Nantes, written as Nantes, Nantes. And everybody comes with this pigeon, like a dog show. They're very proud of their pigeons. And then when the gun goes, they all fly. They fly across the English Channel and they land in a loft in Britain. And first, second, third, all that stuff happens at the other end. ये लोग जाके अपना private plane लेके भागते हैं. This race has been going on for 100 and plus years. But suddenly in 1995, something very unusual happened. This is not in this book, but in another book which I've written. None of the pigeons reached the other end. मर गया. The question arose कि ये हुआ क्या? Now, after a lot of studies, here's what happened. The pigeon race started when there were no supersonic planes, 1875 or something. When a supersonic plane flies over the English Channel, it lets go a funnel of subsonic sounds below 40 cycles, which you and I can't hear, but pigeons can hear. So these pigeons left the loft in Nantes, and when they were crossing the English Channel, a Concorde left Paris or London on its way to New York. उलझन में पड़ गए सब. And they could not navigate anymore. They died. This is what happens when you bring change too fast, and if it's too slow, then nothing happens. And this is the challenge that you have. And one of the things we have covered in this is that if you want to listen to the inaudible, then leaders must go and talk to the most vulnerable people in the organization. Because leaders get locked up in their own echo chamber. And the example is given of Shastriji, who was told in 1964 that there's a guy called Kurian in Anand, in Gujarat, and he's doing some wonderful work, Operation Flood. So come, they'll make a presentation to you, or we'll call them here. He said, I'll go to Kheda. I want to stay one night with a farmer. He should not know that I'm the Prime Minister. फलती मार के जमीन पे बैठ के बाजरा के रोटी खाएंगे उसके साथ. I just want to have a chat with him. They said, this is very difficult, security. But it was arranged. And he went and sat down. And the next morning, he took a walk around, Gai Bhais Dekha. Then he said, now you'd make your presentation to Dr. Kurian and his colleagues. And then he pressed the button for Operation Flood. And it is, From being a world's biggest importer of milk powder, you have become the world's exporter of milk powder now. This is what I mean by saying listen to the most vulnerable people. In my company, Hindustan Lever, the chairman had a practice that some days, 5 days or 10 days in a year would be earmarked. He would go to the market without Paltan, general sales manager, sales director, falana tika, sab saath mein jayenge, so you know what happens. He'll go and say, my name is so and so. लाइफ बॉय कैसा बिक रहा है, क्या प्रॉब्लम है, एंड देन ही विल बी टोल्ड कि इसका क्वालिटी ठीक नहीं है, आपका माल ठीक से आ नहीं रहा है, ऑल दैट स्टफ. It made a big difference because he went to the least listened to people. Some distributor sitting in a small town. How many CEOs go and talk to their distributors without their Paltan with them? Not many. I'm sure there are others, but Hindustan Lever, आज तक वही चल रहा है हिंदुस्तान लीवर में. So, to make sense of the changing world, you have to learn the art of seeing the invisible, listening to the inaudible, and feeling the stuff that cannot. And then, if you have a radical ambition, now today we say we want to be Viksit Bharat in 2047. Well, I don't know, but somebody up there probably knows, I hope. How will we become Viksit Bharat? Right? It requires a complete rethinking. And I'm not suggesting nobody's thought about it. I'm not suggesting I'm smarter than somebody else sitting there. Of our education system, our health system, of our ability to administer. Everything we look to the central government. It's not possible. Rajaji said, India is a governmentless civilization. बगैर सरकार का पंचायत अपने अपने समाज के तरफ से चलते. How will you make a modern version of that? So I'm sure there are smart people who are looking at these aspects. But just setting an ambitious target that my market cap will be 100 billion, 200 billion is not good enough. You need the soft side also to work with it. Maybe I think I can go on and on. The problem with writing a book is that you're full of yourself. But I hope I've given you a sense of what is in the book. I hope I've given you the feeling that this is a book worth reading and thinking about. And I hope if your committee under Savanji agrees that you can create some pedagogy around it, to which I'm telling you my co-author and I are happy to make a contribution. And let's wake up everybody. Not wake up. That gives the impression everybody is sleeping. No. We have to make them more alert. Like in COVID time, we were not all sleeping. But you're not washing your hands 10 times a day. You have to do it. Somebody has to tell you that. The same sort of principle. And make our small contribution as leaders of enterprises to making a Viksit Bharat, which is in the interest of everybody. It doesn't matter which political party you belong to. That's something that's in our common interest. So thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you. I'm very happy to take questions or have a fireside chat with the President and bring in Savan for you in this hot weather. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Absolutely enlightening some of the views, and I think we will open up for sure